Right, mate. Be interesting now just to, do a documentation of on your initial experiences when, obviously, you first become aware of the UFO phenomena and all its little traits and anomalies that go with it.
Yeah.
Just go back to the first time that you recall the I call a main event experience. So.
Well, I suppose the main event that I first recollect was when I was taken with my sister.
Yeah.
When I was about 7 years of age, when we were on holiday together in Prestatyn,
right,
in North Wales. My parents had left us just on the beach, just through the sand dunes. We were staying at a place called Gronant. It was a caravan park, and basically we asked to stay and play on the beach for a few minutes while they went back and prepared something to eat.
Right.
And my dad was a very strict sort of a guy, and we behaved ourselves. So he would have expected us to do exactly what he said. And he said, no longer than half an hour, and then I want to see you back at the caravan.
Right.
So Jane and I played for a little while, and then something happened, and we now believe that we were both taken.
Right.
And we found ourselves on the single track road which ran through the campsite.
Right.
And that was the only road. So walking up and down there you would easily be spotted. But we realised that it was much later in the afternoon, and it had been sun shining when we were left on the beach, but it was raining now as we were walking along, and we felt quite disorientated, and we couldn't find the caravan, even though it was right at the side of the road. It should have been easy. Anyway, a family took us in, very kind family, and they went and found my parents, and it turned out that they'd been looking for us for about 4 hours.
Right.
They were absolutely distraught. My parents had been running up and down the beach and up and down the site, and we were nowhere to be seen, which would have been impossible, because all we did, as I say, was walk up and down that road.
So obviously somewhere along that road during that time interval you encountered something that gave you a missing time of...
Well, I believe we were taken when we were on the beach,
right,
just through the sand dunes,
right,
and then we were replaced back on the road.
Were the sand dunes in a position where at the times you were isolated or out of sight of the people?
Absolutely.
And so this is, you're talking about in the early 1950s?
Well, I was born in 52 and I was 7, so that'd be 59.
59.
Yeah.
Okay. So obviously, did your sister have any recollection at all of what else has gone on? And obviously at a later time?
Yeah, absolutely. My sister's got a better memory than I have,
right,
which is very helpful at times,
yeah.
I must admit. Let me see now. A couple of years later, when I was 9, I can't be exact.
No.
I'm pretty sure that this is the right date. My sister would be 7. We went on holiday to Llandudno,
right,
just a bit further along the coast. And again, we were staying in digs in Llandudno, and Jane and I, I don't know whether you know Llandudno, but you have the Great Orme,
yeah,
rocky promontory that sticks out there, and all the way around is a single tarmac road,
yeah,
with a wall at the side of it, and then over the wall there's a drop down to the sea,
yeah,
over rocks, a drop which must be getting on for 100 feet, I would think, for most of the way round. And suddenly Jane and I found ourselves right at the bottom of those rocks on the far side of the Orme, near to the sea. We had no idea how we got there at all.
Is there like a path access route?
No, there's no paths or access routes at all.
So somehow someone got you there safely. Then how did you leave the area?
Well, we had to walk. Well, I said we had to climb up the rocks.
Crikey.
As I say, which was about 100 feet. And my sister recalls looking back to the sea and seeing what she thought was like a carousel on the water, which I guess was probably a disc-shaped craft rotating.
Yeah.
Anyway, we managed to get up to the wall by the road, and I got her over, but then I made the mistake of looking back down, and I froze. And my sister, at 7 years of age, helped me to get over the wall. And she
big achievement, really.
And she remembers that quite clearly.
Do you think that it's just a coincidence or another of the synchronicities that only 2 or 3 days ago you returned virtually to the same spot?
Yeah, I did think about it when I was there on the Skywatch on Saturday.
This maybe something's orchestrated you back to an area of extreme interesting events when you were childhood.
Yes.
But obviously when you had the first incident, did you have any kind of recollection later on, similar to your sister, that something had took place because you moved from one weather type to another without being aware of the change of weather? So obviously was this 4+ hours? I suppose it must be more than 4 hours because they were aware you were missing for 4 hours. Was it?
Well, they would have checked on us pretty quickly.
Right,
I guess,
so it'd been approximately around 4 hours.
Yeah, I guess so. I wasn't in those days. I knew nothing about UFOs or anything like that. So I wouldn't look for, say, scoop marks or anything like that, which of course I've become familiar with over the years. But I do recall that when we got home after the holiday, for a period of what seemed like about a month, I had terrible nosebleeds.
Which is typical, isn't it?
It's typical of having an implant.
Was it one or both nostrils?
To be honest with you, I couldn't tell you. All I knew was that we had to have a wash in the sink in those days, and every time I pushed the water up to my face and touched my nose,
did your sister
instantly
have also noticed?
She didn't.
Yeah.
It was just me.
Right.
Prior to that, as far as I recall, I'd never had a nosebleed.
Right.
And since that time, I've never had a nosebleed.
Right.
So I think that in some way it was connected with being taken.
So what was the next major event?
Well, can I just go back to the Llandudno one, the Great Orme one, for a second? Because when we managed to get over the wall and back onto the tarmac road, we both recall just walking a few paces, and then the next thing we were back in the accommodation.
Right.
And my parents were none the wiser.
Right.
As far as they were concerned, nothing had happened. And when we told them about it years later, they had no memory of anything strange happening.
Right.
Now I did think that this was such a strange memory that perhaps I'd imagined it or dreamed it or something. But when I spoke to my sister just a few years ago about it, she said, "Oh crikey, no, it really happened." Yeah. And she mentioned about me freezing as she tried to get me over the wall.
Right.
So I have no doubt that it was a real encounter. But at no time, even though on the face of it was a dangerous situation to be in, at no time do I now think that we were really in danger, because I'm quite certain that we were being monitored all the time.
Yeah, the whole event would have been overseen.
Oh, completely.
Yeah, just to make sure that that if you did encounter something that is really dangerous, they wouldn't leave you in a situation to come in harm. They would intervene. That's normally the case. So
I think I have a feeling. Let me say this: that when I was about 5 years of age, one night on my own in my bedroom, I remember having what people might think of as a nightmare, but it wasn't a nightmare. And this, I saw a massive head of a bull African elephant in the corner of my bedroom.
Right.
And it was swaying from side to side, massive tusks. The power of this thing was just incredible. I lay there, I looked at it, I was scared stiff, and I couldn't get a word out at first. Eventually, I did manage to call my mum from the next bedroom, and she came and she stood in the doorway, which was a bit strange. But I thought she would have come in the bedroom, you see. But she stood in the doorway and said, "What on earth's the matter?" And I looked at my mum, and I looked at the elephant, and it was still there. And I looked at my mum, and I looked at the elephant, and this only reinforced the fact that this was a real thing, you know.
And obviously your mum wasn't aware that something else was in the room.
Not at all.
If it was an elephant or not, if she wasn't aware of it.
Absolutely. But anyway, then it just disintegrated and went. But I'm certain that it wasn't a nightmare or a dream. I'm quite certain that it was a visitation from some being of some kind, and the purpose of it, I think, and possibly the purpose of the Landudno thing, was to do with getting rid of fear, making me become brave, because I had to overcome the fear of the elephant, and also had to overcome the fear of climbing the rocks. I do have a feeling that this is what it was all about, because in later years, I've seen E.T. And I'm not afraid. And I think it was necessary for me to go through these processes.
When you were small, did you have an affinity with elephants, or like
Yes, absolutely. I have, definitely. I mean, as you know, I have a friend, David, in Wales, who is incredibly psychic, and he has seen Ganesh, Lord Ganesh, the elephant god, standing behind me. So I do feel that there's a definite connection.
Not just like use the image of an elephant to reassure you that it was something that was a small elephant.
No.
It was a case. What colour was this elephant? Was it a normal grey type?
Grey, yeah, absolutely. White tusks, fantastic, incredible. The power of it, well, you can just, if you can imagine a bull African elephant right in your face kind of thing, it was just incredible. I mean, at 5 years of age, this was 1957, I doubt, we didn't have a television. I doubt whether I'd seen much in the way of elephants.
Maybe the odd trip to the zoo, possibly.
I suppose it's possible. Where we lived, we didn't have much money. I think it's very unlikely that I would have been taken to the zoo at that early age. And for me to know for sure that this was an African elephant.
It must have been something that obviously you were made aware of for that young age.
Absolutely.
To know the difference between Indian and African elephants.
Yeah, without a doubt.
So I mean,
it would be easy for me to say, oh, it was an Indian elephant because of Lord Ganesh being Indian, an Indian god.
You wouldn't have even known about that,
but not at all. But the truth is the truth, and this was an African elephant.
So was there a big gap between your next recalled experience?
Well, that takes us up to about 9. My things seemed to quieten off after that, although I'm quite sure there must be stuff that I just don't remember. But the next main event was when I was 28 years old. I married, got 2 sons. I was travelling home from Macclesfield to Congleton, where I lived at the time, along the Macclesfield to Leek Road. And this was the 28th of December 1980, which was the same time as the Rendlesham Forest incident. And one thing that's always struck me about a lot is made of the Rendlesham Forest incident, and quite rightly too. But what a lot of people don't realise is there was a huge amount of activity throughout the country, and maybe throughout the world at that time. Because not only did I have this encounter, but other people just a few miles from me reported seeing craft at Hazel Grove. which was all over the front page of the newspaper.
Was it the same time as the Cache Lindrum?
Exactly the same time as the Cache Lindrum.
Oh,
Yes,
so
indeed.
it's a bit of a coincidence. So it's just, like I say, a global activity point.
I think so. There was a lot more going on than what people realised at the time. Yes, I was driving home. I'd got one of my sons with me. Can't honestly remember which. And my other son was in my wife's car, following on behind. And we came out of Macclesfield down to a place called Fool's Nook,
Right.
and which is a very interesting ancient place. There are round barrows there, and we do know that the Beaker people were camped there
Right.
long ago. But it's a very important place for energy. There's a powerful ley line that runs right through that area. And anyway, I spotted this rather large red light up ahead of me, perhaps about half a mile, and I knew that it was not a farmer with a lantern, because it was just too big. And I also knew it wasn't an aeroplane either,
Right.
because it was just too low, because there were surrounding hills. And so I thought, this is very strange, so I kept my eye on it as long as I could, driving along. Then went through a woody, twisty section and lost sight of it, and came out on a straight, and at the end of the straight was a lay-by. And I just felt that this thing must have been around this area. I had a feeling. So I pulled into the lay-by and got out of the car, and there, right above my head, was this huge disc.
Right.
Now, I've always said it was probably 85, 90 foot in diameter. It could have been bigger, but it was probably less than 200 feet above my head.
That's quite low, isn't it?
Yes.
That's something that size.
Yes, yes. It blotted the sky out, and looking up at it, this was about 9 o'clock in the evening, midwinter. So it was dark, but it was a clear, crisp night, and the stars were shining brightly. But above my head was this black ring, a big black hole, and it was like looking up a sooty chimney.
Oh, right.
It was a different blackness to the blackness of the surrounding sky.
Right.
It was like sooty somehow.
Yeah, so more denser.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing about it was that even though it was this close, your eyes had difficulty actually focusing on the point where the bottom was.
Right.
You know, the event horizon of the thing, or whatever. You know, anyway, at this point I couldn't see any lights on it at all, because I could only see the underside. I mean, it blotted the sky out. I could only see the stars just under the rim of this thing,
Right.
in between the rim and the tops of the hills around. You know.
So it really was a large craft.
Oh my goodness, yes.
You know, actually taking so much of your peripheral vision, obscuring it.
Absolutely. It wasn't dead centre over me. I would say it had maybe about a third of it over me. The other
Right.
2/3 just over the fields at the side. And it was making a noise. It made a very deep, rumbling, roaring sound. But this was not at all unpleasant. It didn't. It felt almost as though the noise was sort of held within the craft,
Right.
for the most part.
Right.
If you can imagine any vehicle of that size hovering a couple hundred feet above your head, any conventional vehicle, you know, like a Harrier or something like that, you would have no ears left.
No.
But this was not unpleasant.
Oh.
And then slowly it started to move off towards Macclesfield. It didn't go up, it was just going horizontally, which was not much more than treetop height in some places. And it was then that I could see that there was a row of windows around the bottom part of this craft. It was a domed craft with a flat bottom and a row of rectangular windows. There was a soft light inside each window, but I couldn't make out anything on the inside of it. I don't know, I got the feeling that each window was maybe about 6 foot by 3 foot deep, and a gap in between them of maybe a couple of feet, something like that. Now, I was perfectly aware that people wouldn't believe me, and so I thought I must get as much detail as I possibly can. So I counted the windows 3 times, and each time I counted 11 and a half windows visible from a side-on view. Obviously they carried on round the other side.
So it's quite a large object, isn't it?
Oh, it was big. It really was. And by this time, as it's moving away, my wife pulled in her car and got out of the car and stood there with me, watching this thing fly slowly away, perhaps no more than 30 miles an hour, I would have said, towards Lime Green. And that was an incredible experience. I mean, it's a major road, the Macclesfield Leek Road, and there were 1 or 2 cars, and I think a box van came up the road towards us, and I look back at them sometimes and I thought, you know, why can't you see this thing?
Yeah.
But they didn't, you know.
But your wife could see it independently.
She saw it all right. Yeah. It frightened her, to be honest.
So what colour would you say the actual craft surface would be?
I would think well, to be honest with you, it was impossible to say, really.
Right.
I mean, yeah, it would be impossible to say.
How did your children react to it?
They were only very young at the time.
Right.
Perhaps about 5 years of age, 3 years of age, something like that. So they don't really have any memory of it.
No.
But I'm quite certain that a lot more happened than I was aware of, because there's certain things that don't make sense, don't add up.
Right.
For instance, I was able to watch this craft all the way up to Lime Green near Macclesfield. Now, I know now, standing in that location, that I wouldn't be able to see the craft all that way.
No.
Because of trees intervening and stuff like that. So something was strange. A lot went on, and we both know that things can take place in seconds. You know that
it can be complete distortion of reality and time, because you can be in multiple locations within an impossible time frame. So it's they can play with your perception of reality.
Definitely, absolutely. And of course, since that time, I mean, that sparked my interest in what was going on the Macclesfield Leek Road.
Right.
And now, I mean, a friend of mine, Doug Pickford, was the editor of the Macclesfield Express and Times, and other newspapers as well. And he had reports sent into the paper. He reckoned, I think, at least 35 different reports that people had sent in of UFOs seen on that road over the years.
Is there an ancient connection? Is it a Roman road?
There is an ancient connection further down the road, in that it's what do they call it now? Is it the Priest's Way or something like that? It was a processional route.
Is there any local quarries?
Yes, there's a local quarry right there where I saw the craft.
Right.
You know, a few hundred yards away.
Right.
And since that time, I know of 2 other separate witnesses who saw craft in that exact location. I've met friends who've stopped by the roadside back in the 60s, who were older than me, who've seen like a spinning top craft, rotating craft with all lights on it in the field. Only since I started to open up about all this and start talking about it, as I do, to people, have they said, well, I haven't told anybody this before, but years ago me and my friend were on our way to Leek and we saw this thing, da da da.
It always takes somebody else to break the ice, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
And it all comes out from loads of different witnesses.
Well, people have always been surprised at how open I am about these things, and am I not afraid of getting knocked back or being ridiculed? And occasionally that does happen, but it doesn't bother me.
It's worth the price to bring forward other people's experiences.
Absolutely, it's like winning the pools to me, to be able to help them to open up about this stuff, because they feel so much better about it when they've got it off the chest.
And they need reassurance and to come out of denial that what they've encountered is not fictitious or imagined. So it's a case of, like I say, they need people to come forward, break the ice, be the ones that lead the way, and then the rest can follow to the point.
Absolutely.
But like if that's general what's going on around the planet, people are holding back, and obviously the powers that be want to try and keep everybody holding back.
They do, but I'm afraid I'm a blabbermouth, so I'm afraid I'm a lost cause. But just going back to the sighting again, so that was that, and we drove home. We'd no idea about things like missing time or anything, so we didn't check time or anything like that. The following morning, though, I drove to work about 9 o'clock in the morning, and I drove past that exact spot. And of course I looked up thinking, this is where it all happened. But I drove on then past the Fool's Nook and round the corner by the canal, and started to go up the road towards Lime Green, and another craft flew out of the field at the side of the road.
Very interesting.
It flew across the road in front of me at about a 45-degree angle going upwards. It was nothing like the other one. It was like a tin can, I should think,
right,
about the size of a small car. There were no protrusions on it, no windows, no signs of propulsion, and I couldn't believe my eyes after seeing what I'd seen the night before.
Were there any reports of swirls or rock formations, or what's called UFO nests in that area?
Not at that time, I don't think. Back in 1980, people were loath to come forward, even if they saw something.
There was still that very deep era of ridicule and suppression of people's experiences. It's only the past 5 or 6 years that people started to move forward.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I was
changing attitude by the press, to be honest.
I was part owner of a small business back in 1980, and there were 3 of us involved, and of course my other 2 partners laughed at me.
Yeah, they would do.
When I told them what had happened, until about 3 days later, when the local free giveaway paper, the Stockport Messenger, was delivered to one of my partner's houses.
Right.
And he picked it up, and the front page was covered in reports of UFOs that had been reported by different witnesses at Hazel Grove that very weekend. So that kind of shut him up. So I thought, yeah, that's great.
Spot on.
Yeah. But I didn't even save that damn paper.
That's typical of the time.
God. And I've been back to the records office and everything, and I can't find a copy of it.
Isn't that annoying?
Yeah, it is. But anyway, I know what I saw. So
definitely. So I mean, obviously that was one of the main events where it confirmed to you that you're involved with something that was quite
well, as I say,
unusual.
I was 28 at the time, and it kind of brought back the memories of stuff that had happened before, and then it made me take notice of things that were going to happen in the future.
Right.
And as you know, of course, I've had many encounters since then.
Right.
On a contact basis,
Right.
whereby I've been taken from my home and left with different puncture marks in different places, triangle marks, but I don't feel as if I've been harmed or injured in any way whatsoever.
Do you ever feel a compulsion to maybe trying to find out what was going on during missing time when you were on the beach, or even on the rock face at Llandudno?
No, strangely not.
No.
I've never been regressed in order to find out the details of these things. It's almost as if I'm quite content,
Not to know, really.
Not to know. I know that. I mean, I've not had an experience since October of 2013.
Right.
Which is quite a long time for me, because I normally have an experience about every 6 months or so. But in the next experience, I won't be phased by it.
Oh no, because
You know?
obviously been a lifelong thing, but to get introduced to this at a young age on the beach, and both times interesting that there's a water location, both by the sea.
Yeah.
So I mean, that is quite common to a lot of people on beaches or areas, isolated beaches, and it would seem maybe that's a trait that might follow you throughout your life to a point. I mean, sometimes people have regression or recall that would, indicate many other experiences, and it could be just a case of those are only a few that you've recalled.
Oh yeah, I'm sure I've been with them on many occasions. I've had some incredible things happen to me. My overall feeling about all this is that I'm being educated.
Right.
Because what I've found is that information and people who have had experiences seem to come to me whether I'm looking for it or not.
Right.
So it's as if they're being guided to me.
It seems like there's a possibility that your destiny was to reassure people who've had experiences that they could overcome the ridicule and the fear factor, and then go on their way.
Yeah.
And not only come to terms with what's happened to them, but help others to do the same.
Absolutely.
And like I say, it's really increasingly the numbers of a much larger family, an awareness to a different reality.
Well, you said it, family is the right word.
Yeah.
I must say, I mean, I like people, as you know, but I do feel when I meet people who've been taken that I can tell,
Yeah.
and it is like meeting family, and we're very comfortable, you know.
Well, that's very interesting. I mean, we can explore other experiences another time, but that's interesting. That's your initial awareness of the phenomena and the many multifaceted levels that it's all about. So it's very interesting for that, Robert. Anyway, thank you.
You're very welcome, Phil.